that at the end of the show. We have to go through the FEMA update. And I think the FEMA stuff is analogous of what happened in Jasper. There was a disaster and the bureaucrats, the powers that be, decided to monopolize on that disaster rather than help people out. And it reminds me of the end of The Village. Spoiler alert, the village elders were in control of the monster the whole time. They used the monster to control the public. Oh my gosh, it's such a revelation. The people were dead, or he was dead the whole time. So it feels like that. It feels just like that. It feels like they say, look at that fire that happened, that very climate changey fire. And then we find out that it's actually a bureaucracy driven, we didn't do basic forestry management fire. And nobody's going to get held accountable for that. Very, very interesting, right? And so same thing happening in the US, but different. It's the same, a different stanza in the same song. Sorry about that. Jagmeet Singh calls for Justin Trudeau to call his lawyers off. Or what, Jagmeet? You're going to tweet about it more? Like, you're not going to do anything about it. That's clear. You haven't done anything up till now. So why would you do anything different? Like, saber rattling doesn't work, Jagmeet. It's just silly. It looks dumb. Weather modification treaties between the US and Canada. Yeah, we're going to look at that. And a whole lot more. The weather stuff is very interesting. This Category 5 hurricane that we're watching shape up in Florida is a disaster in and of itself, but so is, again, the FEMA response. That's an ongoing disaster and people are trying to fix it, but FEMA's got a lot of power and connections and they are pulling strings to counter those moves. And so in the face of all of that, this upcoming election seems very, very dicey, right? The US election. And that does matter in Canada as well. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. We've got to start with CO2. And there's a whole lot going on with regards to climate change, the justification for carbon taxes. And as it turns out, the people who are managing all of this stuff, using a lot of tax dollars to, it seems, purposely allow catastrophes to justify further crackdowns and loss of freedoms, these people don't take notes. They don't do basic things that you would do in meetings, right? No notes. Who needs notes, right? Where we're going, we don't need notes. Dan's an MP in Dauphin, Swan River, Nipawin, and he says, we do not take notes at my operations team meeting. Minister Guilbeault's VP at Parks Canada. The Jasper wildfire investigation has revealed gross negligence from Minister Guilbeault's department. Now we learn Parks Canada is not keeping track of their work. So here is Brandon Leslie doing some questioning. And here we go.
Would you be willing to table any conversations written down in any way that do back up the claim of what happened behind this closed door meeting? Could you table something that would alleviate my concern that this was, in fact, about political pressure, not about a debate of mechanical use or prescribed burns? Is there anything you could provide me to ease my mind?
I don't know what could ease your mind, and we do not take notes at my operations team meeting. Full stop. I couldn't provide it for any meeting. We have one today. I have no notes.
Would you be willing to table?
Weird. What did you talk about? I mean, they can't prove it, so like, can say anything, right? Dan again says, breaking, Canada's Environment Commissioners revealed that mega corporations can fast track access to the Liberal taxpayer funded $8 billion net zero accelerator fund with a letter to the Prime Minister. Meanwhile, the commissioner revealed that nearly 70% of contracts were signed without any commitment to reduce emissions, despite the Liberals claiming this $8 billion fund was needed to reduce emissions. It's special access to $8 billion of your money for non-Canadian companies with a simple letter to Justin Trudeau. This is unheard of. Is this Justin Trudeau's most expensive scandal to date? Stay tuned. So all you have to do is write a letter to Justin Trudeau and ask for some money from that green accelerator fund. And as long as you know the right people, the letter makes it and you've got some money. And the Canadian taxpayer thinks that you're a green company doing great things because the Canadian government endorses you by giving you money. Here we go.
So the Net Zero Accelerator Fund is part of Environment and Climate Change Canada's emission reduction plan, but it's administered by ISED. So it's an ISED grant and contribution program.
They can still access billions of dollars through a letter to the Prime Minister, though, correct? These mega corporations.
Well, that's what's set out in the process that they provided to us as to in Exhibit 4.2. So the Net Zero Accelerator Fund is part of environment.
Okay, so in 4.2, part of the process is mega corporations can submit a letter to access these billions of dollars in net zero climate funding. Yay. Here's Dan again. He says carbon tax makes up about 13% of our fuel charge. So this is understanding the impact of these carbon taxes that are, I guess, funding this $8 billion giveaway. And after 9 years of Trudeau, says Dan, rising shipping costs to northern Canada continue to increase because of the carbon tax and excessive government regulations imposed by this Liberal government. Canadians deserve better. So this is just part of this meeting. Here we go.
What has been the impact of, escalating carbon tax costs, other taxes, fees that are, an additional impediment to what is already a high operating cost environment?
So we've seen similar compounding impacts of air cargo costs in our freight rates that for delivery of goods to our stores. Similar to what's been reported with air passenger travel costs, there's definitely a compounding impact that occurs the further north you go. Carbon tax, I think right now makes up about 13% of our fuel surcharge component of our cargo contracts. It definitely plays a role in higher food prices. It has had one of many compounding impacts, but so has changes in pilot duty time and hours and regulations, reducing the amount of same flights and distance of flights that the same pilot crew can cover. I think there's been, between fuel, pilot duty time, and things like carbon tax accumulating over the last 4 years in particular, we've seen higher rates of inflation than I've seen in the 30-year career that I've had working in the North.
Higher rates of inflation than 30 years of me working here. I've never seen anything like that in the last 4 years. And so that kind of inflation is harmful, especially to the people who can't access food easily. It was hard before. Now, well, I mean, these people are miracle workers, right? And it's unbelievable that the Liberals are continuing to push this as a solution. And anybody who says this isn't actually a solution, it's a plan for poverty and starvation in the dark, they say, oh, well, you don't have a plan for climate change. Well, we have a plan to not starve in the dark. So Disordered says, talking about chemtrails and spraying in the sky, Danielle Smith says, if anyone's doing it, it's the U.S. Department of Defense. And I said, if that was true, probably Danielle Smith would be able to find out. Maybe she wouldn't be able to tell us. But would she then say, I know, but I can't tell you? Or would she say, oh yeah, if it's anybody, it's the U.S. Department of Defense. You know those M&M guys that you see on the TV, on the commercials? Yeah, those guys. It's probably them, right? Like, is this real? Are we supposed to believe that? Is that the real final answer from the premier of the province? It's probably the U.S. Department of Defense? Come on. However, Lion Advocacy, well, I'll let her say it. We'll watch. Here we go.
The best I have been able to do is talk to the woman who is responsible for controlling the airspace, and she says no one is allowed to go up and spray anything in the air. We have she's told me, the other person told me that if anyone is doing it, it's the U.S. Department of Defense. And, I have some limitations in what I can do in my job. I don't know that I would have much power if that is the case, if the U.S. Department of Defense is spraying us.
You'd have enough power to know, hi, I'm the premier of the province, and I've noticed these things in the sky. And I was wondering, is that you guys? Just a yes or no would be fine. Give them a checkbox if you want. Like, there must be a channel somewhere where you can verify what this is. Otherwise, if you look up and say, those guys again, I wonder who they are. Oh, well, seems like a tough problem to solve. I guess I won't do anything about it except call a couple of people. And then when they give me bullshit answers, not look any further into it. That's a good plan. What? Lion Advocacy responds to this and says, it's not a conspiracy theory. Please ask Environment Canada for the ATIP A 2023-02188/MM2 or help intervene and help the OIC, Order in Council, force the release of all weather modification activities under Treaty E103819 and stop gaslighting the public while I have your attention. Right. So like here is Treaty E103819. And it was linked handily by Naya, so I'm not perfect or anything like that. Naya was like, here's the treaty you were talking about. Great, thanks everyone, I appreciate the help. And so the treaty says, agreement between Canada and the United States of America relating to the exchange of information on weather modification activities. And then it says, CTS 1975, number 11. So this is not new. Okay, this is very not new. In fact, I was born after 1975. And so this weather modification has been happening my whole life. And it was something that up until recently, even with the climate change nonsense, even with the fervor over climate change, weather modification wasn't something that I was like, it's probably weather modification. I honestly thought like, oh yeah, climate change is a problem. Sorry, right? But I fell for the trick, right? And so now that I know that they've been modifying the weather, I think to myself, these people have been modifying the weather. And I don't think to myself, oh my gosh, my car is the problem. And I never really thought my car was the problem. I thought, maybe some industrial things. And then I started looking at the output of volcanoes and I was like, well, they're lying. So what's the point now? Like, what's the point of the lie now? Let's find that out, right? But in order to have the lie take shape, in order for the lie to be believable, if they told you climate change is a problem and every year you were shoveling your driveway 9 feet of snow, you know what I mean? 9 feet of snow. There were years where the front lawn of my house didn't have enough square footage to carry all the snow. So you just keep piling it up and you'd have a sore back because you'd be throwing it so friggin' high. And like, those were normal years. Like I never thought to myself, this is a lot of snow. I just thought, oh yeah, we've got another, 30 centimeters, 40 centimeters, whatever it is, big snow. And we'd get regular ones once a month. You'd get big snows, right? And you'd have to shovel that and it would pile up and it wouldn't all melt away. Like it would all pile up all winter long. And then the snow would start getting dirty and gross in like February and March. And then it would all melt away, right? Like that's how it used to work. And now it like melts away in December, it melts away in January. They don't want us to experience Christmas. They don't like Christmas with snow. They definitely disrupt that. And the way they disrupt that is they can see a snowstorm coming in and all they have to do is raise the temperature of the ionosphere a little bit. And as you'll see in a minute, they can do that very easily with HAARP. And they have been doing this since 1975, at least. In 1975, in this document, they say, the technology's advancing at a rate that's obviously we're going to have to be cooperative about this, right? So there may be a grain of truth in the whole Department of Defense because there's a treaty involved, but we should be able to know about that. 1975 was a long time ago. We should be able to be aware of the information in this treaty. Anyway, the government of Canada and the government of the United States of America, this is the treaty, aware because of their geographic proximity that the effects of weather modification activities carried out by either party or its nationals may affect the territory of the other. Noting the diversity of weather modification activities in both Canada and the United States by private parties, by state and provincial authorities, and by the federal governments, believing that the existing state of knowledge warrants the expectation of further development over a period of time in the science and technology of weather modification, taking into particular consideration special traditions of prior notification and consultation and the close cooperation that have historically characterized relations between Canada and the United States, believing that a prompt exchange of pertinent information regarding the nature and extent of weather modification activities of mutual interest may facilitate the development of technology of weather modification for their mutual benefit, recognizing the desirability of the development of international law relating to weather modification activities having transboundary effects, have agreed to the follows. Article 1, weather modification activities means activities performed with the intent of producing artificial changes in the composition, behavior, or dynamics of the atmosphere. Weather modification activities of mutual interest means weather modification activities carried out in or over the territory of a party within 200 miles of the international boundary, or such activities, whichever conducted, which, in the judgment of a party, may significantly affect the composition, behavior, or dynamics of the atmosphere over the territory of the other party. Responsible agencies means the Atmospheric Environment Service of Canada and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Environment Administration of the United States, or such other agencies as the parties may designate. Hey, well, there's somewhere to start. Tell your staff, I'd like a list of those agencies, and then I'd like a letter penned up to ask this question, and then send the letter. Like step 1, okay? D, reporting requirements means the requirements established by the domestic laws or regulations of the parties for reporting to the responsible agencies, informing information related to weather modification activities by persons or entities engaged in weather modification. And I've shown you before that there are insurance agencies that pay for cloud seeding to disrupt large hail. And if you know that that's all that's going to happen, maybe then you can have a conversation. But how do you know that that's all that's going to happen? Like, what about unintended consequences? There's more of this, but I'm not going to read the whole treaty. So even though it's not very long, the link is in the description if you are interested. And you can check it out at, like, you can see the URL. Like, the URL is right here. So if there's a link that you're interested in, just have a look at the URL and you should be able to discern most of it. But this one is a Government of Canada treatyaccord.gc.ca. This is a Government of Canada website. I'm not making this up, right? Nobody's making this up. This is real. They just don't want you to put 2 and 2 together. That's why they canceled me. Lion Advocacy says, I asked Environment Canada and Climate Change for all notes and memos related to cross-border weather modification activities with the U.S. per Treaty E-108 or 103-819 and was denied access to any information whatsoever, likely in part due to military involvement. Response provided. So it says, government of a foreign state, international organization, in international affairs, and personal information. So these are the reasons they can't release the information to Lion Advocacy. And so there you go. I wonder, is Viva Frei fleeing for Florida? Is he just going to the south, like the bottom tip, or what? Is he getting out of the way of the storm? What's going on? I haven't seen anything from Viva Frei, and I mean, like, I'm not a big. I don't do. I don't have capacity to follow a lot of other Canadian creators. But I'm just interested because I know he ran down to Florida, and I might rather be in Montreal at this point in time. Concerned Citizen is playing this, and this is what tells you the HAARP array. Its whole job is to be an atmospheric heater, an ionosphere heater, they said. And so here's what HAARP is about. This is a U.S. Appropriations Subcommittee SD-192, and I think this is going back to the early 2000s maybe, but I'm not sure what year this is. Here we go.
A couple questions here about HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. This is located up in Alaska. It's currently funded by the Air Force Research Lab. It was formerly funded by the Office of Naval Research. One of the prime customers is DARPA, which is currently running experiments at the facilities. To start with you, Dr. Prabhakar, I understand that a lot of folks here on the committee probably don't understand what HAARP does. I think most Alaskans don't really know what HAARP does or why the agency is involved in it. So a very brief explanation.
One of our programs has been using the HAARP facility for the research that it's pursuing. And my understanding is that we did get value out of that interaction.
Dr. Walker, your agency is currently running the facility.
The Air Force has gotten great value out of HAARP in the past. We took over from the Navy and managed it and actually did a number of experiment campaigns up there. Moving on to other ways of managing the ionosphere, which the HAARP was really designed to do, was to inject energy into the ionosphere, be able to actually control it. With DARPA completing their project, that's our last government customer that we have in the site.
It basically makes the ionosphere a laboratory, and we can do experiments that no one else can do. It's a laboratory without walls.
So here's a whole bunch of newspaper articles talking about chemtrails and HAARP are used to manipulate the weather, and so on and so forth, right? There's a concerted effort. And I thought to myself, and I've talked about this on the show before, that what they're spraying in the sky is just one part. You need both parts for it to work. Otherwise, what they're spraying in the sky, sure, it's going to fall down and it could cause negative effects for the plants or the humans that ingest it or have it dropped on them or whatever like that. It could be an attack like that, but I don't think that's the point. I think the point is to give them access to target specific areas in the ionosphere. I think that it's like if you put a cup in the microwave and turn on the microwave, the water in the cup has to have water in it. The water in the cup gets warm, whereas if there's nothing in the microwave, nothing happens. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that the two things work in tandem, and one doesn't work without the other. And so I think we're being subject to a huge amount of weather modification and manipulation. Here's General Flynn talking about the beginning of this clip. He talks about how different states have their own weather modification, and he spells out the website names using like military lingo, like Foxtrot, whatever, blah, 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 to spell it out. And I thought it was kind of funny. But at the end here, he kind of sums it all up. Here we go.
Know what this is Hurricane Milton we're talking about. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, that I know exactly what they've done. But what I am saying is that, the question, are there U.S. government and now state level funded and directed weather modification programs? Yeah, there are. So
there are. There you go. I mean, it's a 2.5 minute clip. You can check it out. But it's one of those things where I feel like if we turn all that off, we might just have like winter the way we used to have winter, and like spring and fall the way we used to have spring and fall, and we won't have to spend $1 to do anything about it. You know what I'm saying? We wouldn't have to spend money. We'd in fact save money. We could stop shelling all this money to Ukraine and all around the world to pay for all these spraying of ourselves, to give whoever wants to control our weather the power to control the weather. It's pretty wild stuff. Cat Canadas, let's move on. We've got protests to talk about. So the other day they were burning Canadian flags, and this was the Samadin or Samadon or whatever group of people, and a lot of the conservatives have been very incensed by this, and they say we can't have this, we can't allow this. And quite honestly, they said death to Canada, death to America, death to Israel. And if you ask me, they're more mad about the people saying death to Israel than any of the other ones, and I think that that's weird. Honestly. And so this is one of the things that gets me, and I think is the core of this problem, because Amazing Polly is correct in that burning a flag in Canada is legal. That's protected under free speech rights. So you're allowed to burn the Canadian flag in Canada if you feel like you want to. But burning it in public has other issues, but we'll get to that in a minute. The Vancouver police cover it. But the symbology of burning a flag and saying death to Canada, death to the United States is very violent, is very clearly violent, and violent towards like me and you and anybody who's Canadian or United States or Israeli or anybody who's in the groups that they're threatening violence and using visuals like burning flags and burning effigies and things like that in a threat while you're saying death to you guys, that group of you guys. That seems like a real pointed threat to me. And putting the mandate freedom and a flag of Canada as the flag of Canada as a cape on Terry Fox, that was deemed hateful by our government to the degree where they had to call the War Measures Act in to put an end to this unbelievable hate they were seeing on their streets in Ottawa, right? Honkgate, remember Zexi Lee, right? And so in contrast to what we're seeing now, and we hear crickets from Zexi Lee and all the rest of these people, it seems wrong, right? It seems like there's a big, vast canyon between what regular people like me see as hatred and extremism and threats and violence, and what the people in charge see as extremism and threats and violence. And they see people carrying Canadian flags around saying, remember the Canada that I know and love that Terry Fox represented? We want that back. And they say, yeah, that's hateful. And they say death to Canada, death to America, death to Israel. They say, yeah, there's nothing to see here. That's fine. They want that. It feels like they want that. And so that's the core of this problem for me. That's where I'm coming from it. Now, it's interesting to me where other people go, and I just think it's interesting. So, well, look, here's Pierre Poilievre talking about the hate mobs in Canada, and this is about the same thing, the Samadin burning the flags, etc. Here we go. Yesterday, it's too quiet. Too quiet. Hold on, we have to start over. He says yesterday. Because I don't want people to miss it. This might not even be loud enough, but I'll turn it up if it's not. Here we go.
Organization chanted in our streets, in Canadian streets, death to Canada, death to the United States, and death to Israel. So this is a terrorist organization. Common sense conservatives are calling for the government under Section 83.03 of the Criminal Code to ban Samadun now. And let's bring home safety and security and peace to our streets. Let's unify our people. Let's end the crime by locking up the dangerous, repeat offenders. Let's secure our borders. Let's keep terrorists out of our country. And let's stand up for what's right once again. Stand with our allies against terrorism and for decency. Let's bring home the country that we knew and still love. Thank you. Yesterday...
So a lot of people are going to like that. A lot of people are going to really say this is the way we need to go. Bob McCann says Charlotte Cates, the Iranian government-recognized international director of pro-Hamas, pro-Hezbollah Samadoun, is free to return to public protests, still under Crown investigation for hate speech, but no charges yet. Okay, so the undertaking is no longer in effect. Any new allegations would, of course, be investigated by the relevant police agency. If, in their view, an offense had been committed, then we would anticipate receiving another report to Crown Counsel setting out the circumstances and the relevant evidence gathered in course of the investigation. So the leader of this group of people who's burning Canadian flags and saying death to Canada, that's free speech. But if you say hold the line, if you're Tamara Lich, if you say anything and you're Tamara Lich, well, that's mischiefy. Right? Andy Lee says, I guess ringleading an international pro-terror organization wasn't mischievous enough to press charges. Again, this is another one of those juxtaposition situations where on one side you've got the Terry Fox wearing the Canadian flag, and that's hate. And on the other side, you've got, I think, somebody who is acting out hatred towards Canada. You're free to go. That's free speech. Weird. The Conservatives under Stephen Harper wanted to strip the citizenship of terrorists from Canada, from Canadian citizens who committed terror acts. And that's, I think, one of the reasons that Harper lost. I mean, there was a big push to get him out, and the media helped Justin Trudeau. But I think that it's further interesting that now we're in a situation where both Pierre Poilievre and BC's Conservative, who's poised to win the next election, it looks like to me, is saying we're going to deport people. Now, I don't know that they're being so clear as to say we'll remove citizenship of Canadian citizens, but they're saying we're going to deport illegals who are here, people who don't belong here, for our safety, right? And so I think it's going to be popular until it's not. But here is Rustad.
Hi, John Rustad here. I'm out in front of the art gallery where last night a mob came and burnt a Canadian flag, threatened Canadians, threatened the United States, threatened Jewish people. I find this sort of violence completely unacceptable. This sort of hate should have no place in British Columbia, and we've had a premier who is silent on this. He refuses to crack down on this in British Columbia. This is unacceptable to us. A Conservative government will make sure we crack down on this type of hate. There is no place for that in British Columbia. Hi, John Rustad.
And when they say we're going to crack down on this type of hate, oh man, as I was saying before, I feel like the Conservatives are going to come in, and so the Liberals want to come in and censor the internet, and they're trying to censor the internet. It seems like against right-wing people who have common sense and who have thought anything through to its logical conclusion. Those people are alt-right, and they need to be censored and removed from the internet. So people are pushing back against that because they don't agree with that, right? But the Conservatives are coming in and they're saying, we need to use all the tools available to get rid of this hatred against Canada. So people are going to cheer and say, yeah, we really do. And so I am not necessarily saying I want the Conservatives to come in and pass a whole bunch of new censorship laws or a whole bunch of new crackdown laws to get rid of this hate. I think we can use existing laws to deport people who are criminals, to crack down on criminality. You can have, if you're calling for, people to be murdered and things like that, calling for kill the boer and all the rest of it. I'm sure there's something on the books that we could deal with. Uttering death threats. Somebody said uttering death threats is a thing that's on the books. I'm sure. And so what I'm saying is, yes, we should deal with this. And I don't think that we should allow crowds to gather and do death to Canada and burn effigies and things like that. I don't think that we should allow that. But I think that we have the tools already available and they're not being used. And one begs the question, why not? Right? And why are these guys saying we need to pass new laws to, make sure that these things happen? Maybe they're saying we need to, Poilievre is saying we need to bring home safety and blah, 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 blah. And he's not being explicit about new laws. My concern is it's new laws. And I think we can advocate for using current laws to get this job done. And we don't need to change necessarily anything. We had a safe country for a very, very long time before Justin Trudeau absolutely destroyed it. We can achieve that again with the balance that we had previous. We don't need new laws to make things safe because the internet's mean. It's just a trick. I feel like it's a trick, right? So Yeah. Here's the Vancouver Police, and they say the fundamental freedom of expression is guaranteed to everyone in Canada under Section 2 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The Vancouver Police Department defends everyone's democratic right to lawfully assemble and express themselves. We have a responsibility to uphold rule of law by providing safe, lawful, and peaceful environments for people to exercise these rights, and we conduct criminal investigations when laws are broken. Recent protests marking the October 7th anniversary of the Hamas attacks on Israel have included acts that many in our community find intolerable, offensive, and unsafe. These acts include people burning a Canadian flag, making inflammatory comments about various nations, including our own, and expressing solidarity with terrorist groups. Burning materials in any crowded place could damage property or endanger others, and anyone who breaks the law is subject to arrest and charges. We have heard from community members and others who are deeply offended. We are conducting investigations into the actions of protesters to determine if criminal offenses occur. Hello everyone, thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful